you know sleep is important and you just woke up in the middle of the night. What should you do? What's up, Active Lifers? Welcome back to the Active Life Podcast. I'm Dr. Sean Pastuch. I'm your host. And today I am joined by world-renowned Dr. Kirk Parsley. This is the guy who makes sure that the Navy SEALs are taking care of themselves, that they're able to get the sleep that they need to recover, to repair from today, to prepare for tomorrow so that they can do all the things that Navy SEALs do. He's retired from his military service, still serves them philanthropically. And when we get into the podcast, the first thing I ask him is who are the people who he's serving now? And that's interesting. You'll hear that he's working with high-level executives, people who've got all the money in the world and want to decide what to do with it so that they can live a life that's active and fulfilling, and they come to him for that help. What I think you're going to find even more interesting is the things that we talk about as it pertains to, are naps valuable? What do you do when you wake up in the middle of the night? Should your mattress be firm, soft? Should you sleep on your side? What supplements are good to help you sleep better at night? Does blue light really matter? These are the kinds of things that we dove into during the podcast. And I think that if you're somebody who takes your sleep seriously, whether you're sleeping well right now or not, want to sleep better, this is a podcast you're going to want to listen to. It was so good that after the show is over, Dr. Parsley and I discussed that we're going to do it again, and it's going to be a full tactical episode, just quick hitter questions from you in the audience. So as you're listening to this podcast, shoot me a DM on Instagram at Dr. Sean Pastuch with any questions that you have for Kirk Parsley the next time that he comes on the Active Life Podcast, which we are already working on getting scheduled. Remember, if you find this podcast valuable, if you learned something today, share it with a friend. Go ahead, give it a 5-star rating, write a review. That is how you help us keep this show viable so that we can keep bringing great guests like Dr. Kirk Parsley and great information to make your life better every day. Let's get to Dr. Kirk. Dr. Kirk Parsley, welcome to the Active Life Podcast.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me on.
It's my pleasure to have you on. Somebody as decorated as you, as accomplished as you, and as intelligent as you, to be able to get the time to sit down and talk about all things sleep that are going to help people who we work with and who listen to this podcast to live a more fulfilling, active life. It's a great privilege, and I appreciate it.
And like I always say, I appreciate the platform. It doesn't mean no good to stand on the soapbox if nobody's paying attention. So
that's true. Soapboxes. I imagine soapboxes would get slippery if you sit on them long enough too.
Yeah.
So
and under my weight, they might break anyway, right?
Yeah, I don't know. You look like you're pretty svelte. I think you're doing all right.
Yeah.
So
well, I'm 250. Right, so
well, hey, 250 lean, mean fighting machine. I'll take it. So you've had a fairly prestigious career, and what I'm curious to start with is, who is the patient that today is coming to Dr. Kirk Parsley for help?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about, I was the physician for the West Coast SEAL teams for a long time. I still have a lot of those guys as clients, especially once they retire. They don't get the VA medical system isn't cutting edge, so to speak. And so I do a lot of work with, still with a lot of special forces guys, but my clients, and that's my philanthropic work, but the volume of those is exponentially more than my private clients. But my private clients are, 45 to 65-year-old men, usually men, traded their health for wealth for, 20, 30, 40 years. And then they had some sort of exit from their company. They sold their company. They stepped down as CEO, whatever, or maybe their brother had a heart attack, or, their younger brother had a heart attack, or, something like that. And, they're either scared into getting their health back, or, they have all the luxury of all this money and time now, and they want to be really healthy so that they can go enjoy it and spend time with their families and all that stuff. So, they come to me, and to be honest, it's an onerous process to work with me, because I want to make sure that you're motivated and you're going to stick with it, and that you don't make me look bad by not doing what we agreed to. I select out the people that I want to work with every year, and we set annual goals and quarterly goals, and try to get people Anywhere from like a guy who's 30 or 40 pounds overweight to like just being able to be lean and active and do whatever he wants, to somebody who's like in pretty good shape or like wants to compete in something again as well. And then I still do a fair amount with certain municipalities, like some law enforcement and some DOD and DOJ and first responder kind of things as well. But the people I spend the most time with are my private clients. Yeah.
So now you mentioned that it's mostly men who are finding you. Do the needs of men and the needs of women in terms of their medical requirements, if you will, do they vary by so much that you are a male specialist, or is it just that men are drawn to you?
It's a both, right? So, if you're going to see a doctor for a medical condition or a medical concern, there's some nuances between men and women. But if you're working with somebody like me, we're talking about performance, right? We're talking about increasing your health span, your strength, your mobility, your power, your anxiety, stress, cognition, like whatever. Like we're trying to make you like a bigger, better, faster version. And I would submit that, special forces, SEALs and guys like that are probably the most performant men in the world. And they have really, and if they stay in there to retirement, I mean, that's a really long, hard, rigorous career. It's not like it gets easier as you get older. It gets harder as you get older. And so I think, the SEAL background and, I understand men a lot more. Now my first year of residency was an OB-GYN. And so I know how to manage female hormones. I'm not as good as I am with men. But more importantly, is like as a man starts to, the true benefit of, I think of any real healthcare provider. I mean, the information's so easy to come by now, but like if you're, I'm almost like a health coach with a medical degree, that I can do other things that a coach can't do. But, when you're working with someone around performance, the nuances matter more than anything, right? It's like, and I can pick up on nuances with men because I'm a man and I've been, I'm almost 53 years old. And so I've been through most of what these guys have been through. And so when they start talking about subtle little changes, I can pick up on that. Or when they start describing something that they can't quite articulate, I can pick up on that. Right. And it's not the same for women. So I'm just not as complete of a package for women,
I get it.
So I usually pass those on to our mutual friend, Gabriella. I just go, hey, she's really great with women. She does basically what I do. So why don't you go work with her?
Yeah. Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. That's a good mutual friend to have right there.
Yeah. She's good people.
So one of the things I want to ask you about is you mentioned that a lot of the men who come to you are dealing with, they've basically traded their health for wealth for, let's say 20, 30 years, whatever it is. They've had some kind of an exit or something happened in their life that reminded them like, oh, wow, this is finite. Like this ends.
Right.
Do you think that their pursuit of wealth would have been better served if they had also prioritized health at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And that's, I think that society writ large has been sold this, ridiculous bag of assumptions that, first that you need to go to college to have a successful career. Secondly, that you need to go to the most prestigious college and get the most prestigious job and identify through your profession. I think all of that's kind of causes people to attribute, to spend too much time with it. Now it's easy for me to say, like, I'm not a billionaire. I'm not worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And so if that's what you wanted to do, there's a price for it, right? There's a price for everything you do. You can achieve anything you want to, but, probably one of the prices of becoming a billionaire is that you probably have to be a little work obsessive, you probably have to be a little, you probably have to be a little unbalanced, to be one of, what of the 0.0001% of the world financially. especially if, you're, really doing it all, doing it from scratch, building something from scratch. So ideally, I think, working with people, and honestly, like I'll say that, if somebody has enough money to cover their bills and save some money and, invest some money, they're just as likely to be happy. They're just as likely to be just as happy as somebody who's worth $10 million or $100 million or $1 billion. I don't see any correlation with it, other than probably the more money you have, the more afraid you are of losing it, and the harder you work to not lose it, because it becomes an identity. So, if I have children, I have adult children, and my advice to them is, find something that you like to do as much as possible. I don't really subscribe to the idea that you have to love your job. Like, your job doesn't have to be your passion. But if it allows you to engage in your passion, then great. I mean, maybe your passion is jujitsu, or maybe your passion is like being, hanging out with your friends, or maybe your passion is going hiking with your kids and, family vacation and spending time with your family, whatever. It's like, I think you need to make enough money to support yourself fairly comfortably to be happy. But, you don't get the health back. These guys come to me after 30 years of mistreating their body, and they say, hey, I was a Division I athlete in college. I want to be back there. I'm like, pump the brakes, Sparky. Like, let's get you fit enough to be able to run around the block without metabolically damaging yourself, physiologically damaging yourself. And there's a cost to it. It's just like there's a cost to being a SEAL. It's a very, very tough job. And it's not something that the human body is really designed to do. And SEALs are broken. Like, they come out after 25 years, and most of them have had 20 surgeries, and they have all kinds of injuries. And they have brain inflammation. They have, like all kinds of problems. And so, there's a price for it. And, like, what I advise my kids to do, like, find something that you at least like to do. Like, don't go through life with drudgery. Like, find something you like to do. But being a whole person is where it's at, in my opinion. Right. So it's like having a balance, and, having a social life, and having a private life, and having some hobbies, and all of that. Like, the health span, I think the idea of health span is much more attractive than lifespan.
Yeah.
If you can live at this, plateaued level, or maybe even be getting slightly better over the course of your life, and then just drop off the cliff and die. That's so much better than this decaying idea. Yeah. Like, well, the last 10 years of my life I spent at my house or in a nursing home or something. Like, nobody really wants to do that. I mean, that's preferable to death, but it's like, no, but that's not what anybody's dreaming about for their old age. I mean, unless maybe you are.
No,
you'd be
I'm
the
not.
first person I've ever heard that said, yeah, I really want to, sit in an activities room and watch television.
No,
for 10 years. Yeah.
I would like for the last day that I'm alive to have no idea that it was going to be the last day I'm alive, and for old age.
I want it to be an absolute shock. I
right.
To be like, but I seem so healthy. And
right.
Bam, it was so good right up until now.
Right.
That's how I want it to go.
Right. I'd like that to be late in life. I don't want that to be next week.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. But that's something that I kind of argue with people, who are so dead set on figuring out cardiovascular disease and like preventing deaths from heart attack. I'm like, yeah, like there's utility to that, because actually, if you look at, I can't remember if it's after 20 or after 30. I think it's after 30. So 30 to 40, 40 to 50, 50 to 60, 60, like every decade, the same number of men die every year of heart attacks.
Interesting.
In each decade, right? But as you get older, that's just a higher percentage of, right? There's not that many 80 to 90-year-olds, so it's a higher percentage, but it's the same total number of people dying in each decade. So yeah, preventing that early onset, like I agree with that, but the statistics are 87.5% of us are going to die from a heart attack, a stroke, or cancer. Like, well, if you get rid of heart attack and stroke, that means everybody dies from cancer. I think I'd rather have a heart attack, like a fatal one time, like bam, that was it. Like so.
Yeah, I guess.
might not be logically sound, but that's that's how I feel.
No, I hear you, and I don't know that I've considered heart attack versus cancer long enough to agree or disagree. I
mean, neither sound great. Like neither.
No.
But
well, you touched on something earlier that I think was really interesting, and I think that you're a great example of it, and that is that right now there's this high pressure to go to not only to go to college, but to go to the college. And if I'm not mistaken, you graduated high school, 17 years old, and then went straight to the Navy. And you're
mistaken. I dropped out of high school.
Okay, go on. Tell me more about that, please, because I want to hear about where it started.
Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up really, what's the politically correct word? Indigent. I mean, like I literally only had shoes during the school year, and probably the first half of my childhood was that way. And then the second half of my childhood, I'd say we were lower middle class. But, had a very disturbed and abusive kind of household, with cops at the house, 3-4 nights a week, and, lots of moving out of the house and then one night to go stay with the relatives for 3 or 4 days and whatever. And so, just environmentally, it wasn't the right place for me. I just never really liked school to begin with. I have 2 sons. One of them's like Mr. Academic, 4.8 GPA in high school, went to kind of had this pick of colleges, did great in college. And my other son is just like a big, strong dude who just wanted to play football and doesn't care about school. And I was the same way. Like, it just wasn't something I was super interested in. And then, my home life made it harder. And, I started getting bad grades kind of as soon as the household abuse and turmoil started. So like 3rd grade, I started getting D's and F's and kind of got pushed along each year. And then after 4 years of high school, I had just now earned enough credits to be a sophomore. And I was like, none of my friends knew, none of my high school friends knew that I wasn't graduate. Like, they didn't really notice that they didn't have any classes with me because I was in classes with all the younger kids. And, and I just bailed and went to the military. And I'd always planned on going to the military anyway. So a GED was just as good for getting into the military as a high school diploma. So I chose that route. So did you
have to get a college degree before going to medical school while you were in the military? Is that how you did that?
No. So I did my time in the SEAL teams. I was in there for 6 years. It was totally stale time frame, during the Clinton administration and the early George, George Bush Senior. So we had the Gulf War, but that was 6 or 7 bullets. Not really any kind of thing. And so it just seemed redundant. Like, I was just doing the same training trips over and over again with different guys. And I was like, I think I'm going to go do something else. I didn't really know what I was going to do, but I thought maybe physical therapy school. So you have to, I don't know if you know this, but at least back then you had to have 2,000 volunteer hours just to apply to PT school. And so I started volunteering at San Diego Sports Medicine Center. They hired me within probably a week of me volunteering there, and as a PT aide. I was there at a time where you could challenge the test for PT assistant. So I became a PT assistant, and then I worked there all through college, but pretty quickly decided I don't want to be a PT. And then I had, I actually had to start in junior college anyway, because I didn't qualify for college with the GED. I had, there's some basic stuff I had to do in the junior college first. And so I started working there and decided I didn't want to be a PT, but it's really sort of, this amazing healthcare mecca where we had every profession. We had MDs and DOs, we had chiropractors, we had massage therapists, we had athletic trainers, we had podiatrists, we had everything you could possibly imagine we had at that center. And so I got to look around and work with people and chat with people and get to know people. And actually the doctors there talked me into applying for medical school, which I just thought was ridiculous. I was like, dude, I didn't even graduate high school. I think you're setting your sights a little too high. Mm-hmm. And the doctor that owned the clinic came out and said, he overheard the conversation in the hallway, and he came out and said, Kirk, the question isn't, can you get into medical school? The question is, would you go if you got in? Mm-hmm. And I said, of course, I'd love to go if I got in. And he goes, well, you really have to try, because you don't know if you'll get in.
Mm-hmm. That's funny.
All right, fair point. So he kind of shamed me into it.
Mm-hmm. I had a similar inflection point. Mine went a different direction. It was interesting though. I was a personal trainer, and a lot of my clients were really high performing doctors. People who were, in one case, a guy who was advising the president on drugs. In another case, I had one of the top urologists in all of New York State were my clients. And when I told them I wanted to go to chiropractic school, they were like, no, we want you to go to medical school, and all you have to do is tell us that you want to go, and you're in. Like, we'll make the call. And I was like, I don't know if I'm the kind of student who's going to do medical school. Little did I know, chiropractic school, the way I chose to do it, was not any easy shakes either. 124 kids started the class, 77 graduated. But it's interesting that we had a similar experience in some ways in that one. Now,
and I gotta say, I considered chiropractic very seriously as well, just because my only exposure to medicine before I went to medical school was orthopedics and sports medicine, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's all I knew, like musculoskeletal. And I was always fascinated by that. My whole idea of maybe being a PT was the woman who I was dating, who would become my wife. I used to take her textbooks on deployment and read her textbooks from PT school. And I was just fascinated with anatomy and physiology, and really just to make myself a better athlete. Like, I've always been, competitive in some sport or another. And, I would have preferred a DO education over an MD education, but because of their focus on the musculoskeletal system. But I was already married, I already had kids, and the military was going to pay me to go to medical school instead of the other way around. So It's hard to pass that up.
For sure. Now, how did you become so specialized and focused? I don't want to say specialized because that minimizes other things that you do. How did you become so renowned for your education on sleep?
Well, so, the way the military works, they'll train you to do anything, but then you have to pay them back with time, right? So it's usually about a 2-to-1 if you look at the academies, and the military medical school is the same. So, 4-year medical education, you got to be a doctor for them for 8 years. So I figured I would get back to the SEAL teams as a physician there, and kind of give back to the community, get to see my boys and have some fun, and, relive what would then be my youth, my glory days. Mm-hmm. And then when I got there, they just received the funding to build our very first rehab facility ever. Right. So people would have thought that, SEALs had all this specialized help, and we didn't. We had nothing, like literally nothing. So we built this facility. There's like a proper rehab on one side. There's some office spaces in the middle, and then we had what we called a bridge gym on the other side. There's people who are past the rehab state but not ready to go back fully into training with the platoon. So we had athletic trainers, strength and conditioning coaches, and PTs and so forth, working with them on that side. And then the other side was all, those same people, but also, ortho rounds, pain rounds, neuro, whatever, and a lot of PT equipment and modalities. And so the office space in between is where I landed, because after we hired, our first nutritionist and first strength and conditioning coach and our first athletic trainer and our first, everything. And we got amazing people. I mean, we pulled from professional sports teams, from the Olympic Training Center, from, Division I colleges. We had creme de la creme. Right. And then I was now the dumbest guy around. I mean, I knew 1/10 of what any of these people knew about what they do. And so at that point, they in the military, what do you do when you're the dumbest guy? Well, they put you in charge, and they say, well, you're the supervisor. So that was really my job, was to supervise all of these experts. I'm like, I don't know how am I going to supervise them? Like, they know more than I do about what they do by a long shot, but okay, I'll figure this out. And what happened was, the SEAL community is very tight-lipped about certain things. And one of the things they're the most tight-lipped about is their own personal circumstances. And so they'll talk to their buddies about it. They'll talk to other SEALs about it, but they avoid the medical system like the plague, right? Because the worst thing you can do to those guys is put them on the bench, like take them out of their platoon. They would literally rather be shot. Like if you gave them an option, like, hey, we're going to torture you every day for the next year, or you can get out of here, and they take the torture. It's the worst thing in the world for them. So they just go to the doctor and lie when they have to go do a routine physical. They're just like, everything's great, man, no problem, whatever. They'll get their joints injected with steroids so that they can move better during the, like, whatever. They'll cover it up. But because I'd been a SEAL, and I'd been a SEAL recently enough to where there were still a lot of SEALs there that I'd served with. And so they trusted me, and, started with one guy, comes to my office, closes the door behind him, kind of in a hushed voice, like, hey, man, I need to talk to you about some stuff. And, it became what I call the SEAL syndrome. They've done some research and published it. And now they've dubbed it the operator syndrome, because it's not exclusive to SEALs, obviously. But people would come in and they'd say, my cognition is just crap. Like, I can't remember anything. I can't pay attention. I can't focus. I walk in a room, I can't remember why I'm there. I walk out, I remember why I was there. I walk back in, I forget why I was there again. It takes me 5 times leaving my house before I'm actually on my way to work, because I get in my car and realize I forgot my badge, and I go get my badge, and I get back in my car, I realize I forgot my lunch, and then I do this every day, and my motivation just sucks. And again, these are by SEAL standards, so take it with a grain of salt. Like, they're still doing their job, they're still really high performing guys. But my motivation sucks, my mood sucks, my temper, my emotionality is all over the place. I go from being really depressed to super angry, and like all the time, I don't know what's going on. My sex drive sucks. My sexual performance might suck. My body composition shifting. I'm working with the nutritionist. I'm working with the trainers. I'm working with the strength and conditioning guys. And I keep getting fatter. I keep getting weaker. I'm losing muscle. I keep getting slower. I have more and more pain, more and more injuries. But none of it reached the level of disease. And that's what I was trained in, right? I'm like, well, you don't have a disease. Like, I honestly have no idea. I have no idea how to help you. So let's start with me testing everything I can possibly test. And so I just ordered this shotgun, serum level, like, go to the hospital, pull these 17 vials of blood, do 98 serum tests, and let me see if I see a pattern. And my original thought was, maybe this is like adrenal fatigue. Well, I didn't think adrenal fatigue. I thought back to, what you hear from other wars, there's combat fatigue and there's shell shock, and all this. I'm like, well, maybe it's some version of that, because this is 2009. So they've been in combat for 8 years already. Maybe this is some version of that. I don't know. But I knew I needed to get outside of Western medicine if I was going to figure it out. So, so I started looking into all sorts of things, Chinese medicine, and, what they were calling alternative medicine at the time, which I think is now more called integrative and functional medicine. But the beauty of it was I had this opportunity to basically to call anybody in the world and say, hey, I watched your TED Talk, I read your book, I saw your lecture, whatever. I'm the doctor for the West Coast SEAL team. I was wondering if I could come train with you. Could I consult with you? Could I talk to clients with you? And everybody was really gracious. And I got to learn a lot really quickly. And I still didn't have I still didn't know that it was sleep. As I said earlier, accidentally, I started thinking, well, maybe this is adrenal fatigue. And I started reading a lot on that, training with some guys on that. And then I was treating that, and the military got really, really peeved with me that I was outside of my scope as a physician, giving people IV vitamins, because I was giving them Myers cocktails, and how dare I, because that's not something that I'm trained to do. I was like, wow. Okay. All right. Shocker there. And, giving them supplements, adaptogens to help with adrenal recovery. And so like, that was all voodoo, and I wasn't allowed to do that. I'm like, wow. But somewhere along the way, 30, 40 clients entered or something, some guy, and I remember it very clearly. I remember the day I was there, where I was sitting, where I was wearing everything. And this guy said, he mentioned something about taking Ambien, and it just kind of, threw one of those light bulbs off in my head. I was like, yeah, it seems kind of common that people are saying that. And so I just remember writing a note in the margin and then continuing with my interview and assessment and all that. And then when he left, I went back through my shadow files, and every single guy who had been in my office was taking Ambien.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I wonder if that could be related. So I started looking into Ambien. Now, fortunately, as you probably know, when pharmaceutical companies apply for for approval of a drug, they give the FDA the research, right? The FDA doesn't do the research. They give them the research, and the pharmaceutical company owns the research. So they give them what they want to give them.
Right.
And so if it's like, hey, this really supports our case, don't look over here because none of these support our case, but these do. So here's the research. But if they get sued, if it gets pulled into court, well, then they have to open the kimono and show everything. So that had happened. That had just happened within like 6 months to a year of me starting this job. That had just happened. And so I did learn kind of about, well, there are some pretty major side effects to Ambien. Now, I had been in medical school. I'd never had a single class on sleep. I didn't know anything about sleep any more than anyone else did. Like, you could have asked my gardener, you could have asked any SEAL there. Could have asked a janitor. We would have all known the same about sleep. Like, I didn't know anything about it. So you have to know a little bit of something about sleep to, make a postulate as to whether or not Ambien could be causing this, right? And so then once I started learning about sleep and learning what Ambien did, I was like, well, literally every single symptom these guys have could be explained by poor sleep or lack of sleep. Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't think that it would explain everything, but I thought, this has got to be a big chunk of it. So let's get everybody off of Ambien. And then, of course, they're taking Ambien because they can't sleep. So I can't just say, quit taking Ambien and sleep anyway, right? So, really is kind of a group effort between me and the SEALs that I was working with. And we figured out, I figured out what to give them, and we figured out kind of like how much to give them. And I just did a bunch of research. I started with the Cochrane database, and then I went slightly more esoteric out into non-traditional stuff. And I just looked for anything that had evidence to help people sleep that was a non-pharmaceutical. And I came up with a concoction of 7 different supplements. And then the SEALs were going out and buying all these supplements at, 3 or 4 different health food stores. And, some were pills and some were powders and some were liquids. And, some came in 90-day supply, some were 30, and they're just it was a pain in the ass for them to deal with. But we figured out the right dosage, and it helped people to sleep, and it really got them past this hurdle of getting off of Ambien. And once I got them off of Ambien, and they, they were usually, the SEAL mentality of one's good, two's probably better, and 3 might even be a great idea, because I am a SEAL after all, so I probably need more than everybody else, and then have that with a couple of beers or a couple of cocktails, just because you're winding down at the end of your day anyway. So once I learned about the combination of that, and what happens when you sleep and why these things could affect sleep, I was like, well, this could explain everything. So I get everybody off of their Ambien, and I was doing a little bit of supplementation of over-the-counter things like DHEA and some zinc citrate to prevent aromatization of testosterone to estrogen, very simple things that anybody can do. And so in combination with that and getting off of sleep, I was having people, triple, quadruple their testosterone, both total and free, bringing in inflammation weight. I didn't explain what I found in the labs, but I basically found all the anabolic markers to be really low, all the catabolic markers to be really high, inflammation and oxidation up really high. Insulin sensitivity was horrible, considering how fit these guys were and what they were eating and how much they exercised. They weren't diabetic, but man, they were looking kind of their labs looked like that of a 55, 60-year-old, metabolic syndrome, pre-diabetic, guy, and who's, 40, 50 pounds overweight. And of course they weren't. They were 28 to maybe 38, and they were ripped and muscular and fit. And, so anyway, they finally, I literally got laughed out of many offices trying to tell the leadership that I thought sleep was causing the hormone deficiencies that we knew were there. Right. And we knew they were there because I had pulled the labs and I proved that they were there. And that, we had PhDs from the local research center come over and go over my work and yeah, I mean, you guys have a problem. And, after getting laughed out of many offices, I had enough success. And then the word of mouth got around that, I had 45-year-old guys getting PRs across the board. I mean, not for their 40s, but for their life, stronger than they've ever been, faster than they've ever been, like performing better in like their preferred sport or whatever they trained for. And got some buy-in there. And then as an organization, when the SEALs were deploying as teams, then like the entire SEAL Team 1 would deploy and they'd come back in 3 and then 5 and like that. And so when they were deploying, we would take them off to an offsite at a local resort and bring their families and talk to them about, hey, here are the trials and tribulations that you and your family are about to go through. Here are the resources. And then we'd bring in guest speakers who had, some cachet. So guys like Rob Wolf and John Wellborn and Chris Kresser and, Matt Lalonde and, people like that would come and lecture on whatever their expertise was that we thought was applicable to the SEAL teams. And then they would always put me up there because I was free. They didn't have to pay for me to be there. So I was always part of the lecture team. And I was really the only guy talking about sleep. And so Rob Wolf was the first one I really got to know well. And, he was this nutrition guy who spent about a third of his nutrition lecture talking about sleep. And I was a sleep guy who spent a third of my lecture talking about nutrition. So we just kind of hit it off. And then I saw him at multiple events like this and other guys, and they started, inviting me to do other lectures, like symposiums they were doing, and be like, hey, there's this big event, like you should come and lecture there, or take me on their podcast or, things like that. And then I just, by default, became the sleep guy. And, I've been kind of beating this drum since 2009 and, it really caught some momentum when Matt Walker came out with his book. And now social media is full of sleep experts and sleep coaches and everybody, spewing the ideas. And most of it's, the same stuff that I say, the same stuff that I know, because the research in sleep is really consistent. I mean, it's not like nutrition. There's not bickering as to whether you need sleep or not. So.
Well, that's why I wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
Right. So, all right. I would love to get into some really tactical stuff for people who are finding sleep to be something that they A, want to improve, B, are struggling with, and C, are stressed over.
Right.
Right. And so, if it's okay with you, I want to ask you some really stuff that probably for you is fairly boring and tactical and really like secondhand, easy. Yep. But for a lot of people listening is probably the thing that keeps them up at night. No pun intended. Right. So the first question I have for you is tossing and turning. Right. So tossing and turning is something I think a lot of people experience, and then they wake up in the middle of the night and they don't know how to get themselves back to sleep. When people come to me and they're like, my back hurts. What is it? I'm like, I have so many questions to ask you.
Right.
But the reason why I wanted to share that part is I imagine that there is a way to get to the ideology of the tossing and the turning, and that we can then place meaning to it. And if we can place meaning to it, we can put an intervention in place. Is that true, or am I mistaken?
Yep.
So how would somebody go about figuring out why they toss and turn?
Okay. So I can break it down into some very simple categories. Now, the overarching truth is that they probably have too much stress hormones just because that's the way society is now, right? That's the world we live in. And I'll talk specifically about that in a minute, but I kind of break it down into a couple of categories. So there's reasons that you move when you sleep. Even if you get a restful night of sleep, you still have to move around. One is blood flow, right? You're compressing a certain area, that area is not getting blood flow. Once it doesn't have enough blood flow for long enough, you'll start to get an inflammatory response to that. That inflammatory response will trigger you to move, and then you'll move and get more blood flow. All right. So, obviously, how much you weigh, what your body habitus is like, depends a lot on how much blood flow you're going to restrict, but also the surface that you're sleeping on. So you'll move to restore blood flow. Also, a lower body temperature is one of the things that leads to, it's one of the sort of physiologic cues and one of the requirements for being able to fall asleep. And so you need to stay, your body temperature constantly needs to stay at a certain point. It needs to be like a little bit low. And so if you start getting too hot anywhere, you'll move to find a cooler place on the bed or a cooler place on your pillow or whatever, to prevent this heat buildup. And then thirdly, which probably you would see a lot of, I would imagine, is people who, so, and both of those cases that can be fixed with the mattress, right? If you have the right mattress, you're much less likely to compress blood flow. But there's also mattresses now that are designed to stay cooler, right? So you'll move less.
Do you recommend those?
But then, what's that?
Do you recommend those, the ones that cool?
Well, I recommend them if you need them, right? Okay. Like and we can talk specifically about like how I would know if somebody needs them. But then the third category is, is orthopedic, really, right? So it's like your mattress is too soft, or you have injuries or near injuries or limitations in your mobility to where you're compressing a joint or stressing a joint in a bad fashion, and it's causing pain, and then that pain will cause you to move. Now, that tossing and turning, like I said, happens to everybody. We all go through that. However, if you're in deep enough sleep, yes, I mean, if you're in REM sleep, you're paralyzed, right? So you have to come out of REM sleep to move. But you can go right back into REM sleep if you have healthy sleep, So it may not be a big deal. And if you're moving around 20 times a night over the course of 8 hours, big deal. Like that's kind of, that's part of the course. We're expecting that. If you're in deep sleep, you're not paralyzed. So, if you can initiate enough, motor function to move without waking up, you could, you probably will. You will, but that's probably not all that common. But the biggest problem is that one of the factors for being, especially deep sleep. So when you're in deep sleep, that's the lowest your stress hormones are for any 24-hour period of your life, right? That's the most anabolic and the least catabolic, whereas fight or flight would be the most catabolic and the least anabolic. So they're complete opposites. Like maximum stress hormones is fight or flight. Minimum stress hormone is deep sleep. So that's when you're repairing and restoring and regenerating your body, repairing whatever damage you did, making your muscle fibers that you've stressed with exercise, you're making them better and stronger. Like all of that stuff's happening in deep sleep. So if you're messing with your sleep cycles by truly waking up and not just like waking up enough to move, it's usually because your stress hormones are too high. So you can still fall asleep and you can still maybe maintain sleep. But when you have enough of an urge to move, when you move, that pulls you out of sleep so far that you actually are aware of waking up. Like most of us wake up to move multiple times a night, but we don't have any memory of it. We don't know. Right. We don't know we were awake. But if your stress hormones are higher than they should be, significantly higher than they should be, once you come out of that sleep and now you've done a little bit of restoration, you've gotten rid of some of the waste products and stuff, and you're like a little more metabolically ready to be awake. And now your stress hormones are high enough that when you wake up, you actually wake up.
Yeah. How do we reduce the stress hormones then? I'll give you an example. I woke up at 1:15 2 nights ago, a.m.
Right.
And I felt like I was ready to take on the day. And my immediate response was, oh shit.
Right.
Right. Like I knew I was awake and it wasn't like I was going to be able to fall right back to sleep. And I think the same thing happens perhaps for people who wake up and have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Now they get back in bed and they're like, what am I going to, what's to do there?
Okay. So I have, I have a solution for this that I use this with my private clients. It's very low tech, and most people hear it and go, that's way too simple. That seems ridiculous. Like there's no way that's going to work. But of all the stuff that I do, all the stuff that I'm super educated on and cutting edge on and all the gadgets and all the things that my clients use, this is the most powerful thing. Getting rid of stress when you're asleep, right? Mm-hmm. So the first thing to realize, the first little caveat I wanted to mention before, it's like when you go to sleep, your stress hormones, ideally should be at a certain level, but we have something called sleep pressure. So every cell in our body builds up, uses ATP as their fuel source, right? And then as ATP degrades from tri to di to mono, it eventually just becomes A, which is adenosine. And that buildup of adenosine in your brain causes what we call sleep pressure. Sleep pressure isn't all that noticeable on a day-to-day basis, but if you've ever stayed out for like 36 hours in a row or 48 hours in a row and you realize that you could like lay down in a thorn bush and sleep and you're really tempted to, that's sleep pressure, right? Mm-hmm. Men have a lot more muscle mass than women and roughly about the same size brain. So men usually have no problem falling asleep even when they're stressed because the sleep pressure is high enough. But as soon as they go through a sleep cycle and start cleaning up their brain and their getting rid of metabolic waste products and all that stuff, then they wake up. Now right. The stress hormones are high enough to wake them up. So women usually have a hard time falling asleep. Men usually can still fall asleep, but after 1 or 2 sleep cycles, they wake up. So that's, sleep cycles 90 to 120 minutes. So if you're waking up 2 hours after you went to sleep, you probably just finished a sleep cycle. You're going from that sleep cycle to the next sleep cycle, which actually takes you through a millisecond of being awake, and you just woke up.
Yep.
And now your stress hormones are high. And if you've ever been in a fight or flight situation, you know that when your stress hormones are high, you feel really energetic and you feel really alert and you feel really capable and really focused. And so if your stress hormones are waking up, you're like, hey man, I feel great. Like I should go. All right. So if I put you in a completely cold, dark room with no sound and no stimuli whatsoever and just let you sleep, you would still wake up at some point, right? No noise, sound, light, movement, anything, nothing woke you up. You just woke up. And why would you wake up? Because your stress hormones have reached a certain level, right? Mm-hmm. And when they reach that certain level, that's awakeness. And stress hormones get a bad rap because they're thought of as negative, but stress hormones keep you alert in proportion to your environment. And so the minimum alertness is awakeness. And so like just becoming awake is like a minimal level of stress hormones you need to be awake. And then as your day goes on, you progressively get more. All right. So that's important to realize. So if those are too high all throughout the night, then like your odds of waking up at any time during the night or your odds of just not getting good quality of sleep will drastically increase. So to get rid of stress, we have to get rid of everything that we stress over. So I tell people, and this is a PDF I have on my website, and depending on how soon this is going to launch, I can get you in touch with my assistant and you can put a note and a note and show link to whatever, and link in the show notes.
I'll ask her for it.
You know what I was trying to say.
I'll ask her for it. We were talking yesterday. I was telling her that there's a fake Dr. Kirk Parsley out there trying to get people to buy crypto from him on Instagram. Yeah, on Instagram.
Like there's always a new fake guy. Like every couple of weeks, man, there's another fake.
Yeah.
All right. So this will be available for download for your audience if they want to just go there and click on it. But basically it goes like this. You take a piece of notebook paper. I highly recommend doing this handwritten. And that's because there's a neural link between what we write and what we remember and what we think about. And so you draw a vertical line down the center of that. And on the left-hand side, you write your to-do list. And on your right-hand side, you write your to-worry list. Now, the to-do list goes out as far into the future as you're likely to worry about what you have to do, right? Mm-hmm. For me, I don't think past the next day. So like, that's as far as I really need to go. Some people are thinking 6 months in advance. So whatever it is for you, like your to-do list, anything that you would potentially worry about, or anything you'd potentially think about having to do. And you do this during the day. You do this when you're alert and awake, and best is to like put it beside you and kind of add things to it all day as things occur.
Right, so this is not a wake up and write this.
No.
Okay.
This is before bedtime. You're going to write this. And so you write everything you have to do on your left-hand side. On the right side is everything you have to worry about. So that's stuff you don't have any control over, but you don't want to forget to worry about it. And your brain will wake you up to worry about it, just because that's how we're wired. All right. So now the most important part is, and we haven't had a whole lot of time to beat on this drum yet, So I always tell people, go to PubMed, go to Google Scholar, put in sleep and anything you care about, and then read until you're scared and you realize, okay, I'm not going to have what I want if I don't sleep, right? All the research is very consistent. You don't need me to guide you through it. But so now here's the most important part. You have to make this neural link. Like, you have to make this agreement with yourself mentally that the best you're ever going to be at handling this list is after a good night's sleep. Makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. Your brain restores, repairs, restores neurotransmitters, get rid of waste products, cuts off useless stuff, makes new information that's useful, more durable, but easier to access from multiple dimensions. Emotionally categorizes things, like controls your emotionality, controls your appetite, controls your, what we consider our motivation, all of that stuff, all done during sleep. Also, your body is restored during sleep. All your hormones are produced during sleep. All the hormones are balanced during sleep. So the most capable you ever are is probably like an hour after you wake up. So you wake up, you have some coffee, you get some light in your eyes, and like that, there's your peak. Like, you're going to peak from there until wherever you start getting tired in the day. So that's the best you're ever going to be at handling your list. So you have to make this agreement. Why would I think about or worry about anything on this list, or even do anything on this list when I'm not at my peak, right? If these are things that are important to me, they shouldn't be on the list if they aren't important. If these are things important to me, why wouldn't I want to do these at my peak, right? So if you can make that agreement, then the agreement is the only way to be at your peak is to spend 8 hours in bed. Okay. 8 hours in bed. And that's not an exact number, but that's a good enough number to start with. So you need an alarm clock at night to say it's time to get ready for bed, preferably about an hour before bed. Then you get in bed and you go to sleep. You lay down with the intention of going to sleep. And if you don't fall asleep right away, you do progressive muscle relaxation, you do some box breathing, you do some meditation, you do like whatever it is that relaxes you and calms you. I even let people, if you need to, you can start with like a little podcast going or audio book going on the side or something, like anything to kind of distract you from your life, anything that's restful and relaxing to you. And then you just lay there and you do that until the alarm in the morning goes off. And those two alarms are equal, right? That morning alarm, that's the alarm that means you have to get up and do stuff to be a responsible adult and go do your life. But the one that get ready for bed, you don't push that one off any more than you push the other one off, right? And so you go, all right, the alarm went off. I'm going to start getting ready for bed. I'm going to decrease the light in my eyes. I'm going to decrease my interaction with society and with the world and my environment. I'm going to drop my body temperature. I'm going to make my environment cool. That's really all sleep hygiene is. Those three things, that's 100% of sleep hygiene, but there's a million different ways to do that and all sorts of little scripts and techniques for that. So you set the alarm, start getting ready for bed, you get in bed, you lay in bed until the morning alarm clock goes off. If you wake up in the middle of the night, if you have to go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom, then come back, get in bed, and lay there and breathe, relax, meditate. Again, progressive muscle relaxation, whatever it is you need to do, find 3 or 4 ways to really relax yourself. If anything in your mind pops up that you want to think about, you go, oh, that's on the list. I'm going to handle that when I wake up. Okay, that's when I'm going to do it, when I'm at my peak. No sense thinking about it right now. So I don't need a clock because it doesn't matter what time it is. So never look at the clock. I'm not getting out of bed until that morning alarm clock goes off. So if I wake up and I go to the bathroom and I get back in bed and I start meditating, my alarm's not going to go off for 4 more hours. I'm going to fall back to sleep. I don't know when, but I'm going to. And it doesn't matter when, right? And if my alarm clock goes off 15 minutes later, well, then I got 7 hours and 45 minutes of sleep and 15 minutes of meditation. That's still better than 7 hours and 45 minutes worth of sleep. So now I'm ready to get up and go through my day. Like I said, if it's not going to go off for multiple hours, I'm going to fall back to sleep. And as long as I'm making it okay that, hey, I'm in this bed to repair from today and to prepare for tomorrow, and I'm doing that by putting my body in the most restful state I can get it into. And right now, the most restful state that I can get into is box breathing. Whatever. I'm going to do that until I can get in a more restful state, which is sleep.
What I'm hearing you say is take everything that stresses you out and put it on paper well before you go into bed. Do that at peak hour, an hour after you're awake, 2 hours after you're awake. Yeah. Now you have the peace of mind that I already am aware of this. There's no use in thinking about it right now. Right. And then when you're in bed, giving yourself the grace, if you will. I woke up. So I woke up. So I woke up. And then just stay there. And I think, because I think that's interesting, because one of the things that I find consistently when I hear people talk about struggling with sleep is I wake up and then I'm stressed that I can't fall back to sleep. And so now I'm in stress about the thing that I'm not doing that I'm trying to do. And it's this vicious cycle.
Especially if you look at the clock, right? Because if you look at the clock, now you start doing mental math about, well, if I can fall asleep in the next 17 minutes, I'll get this much sleep, right? And then if you keep looking at the clock and you're not back asleep and you're worried, now you're starting to worry about your time and like, oh, shoot. And then you're like, well, maybe I'll skip the gym tomorrow. So I'll put my alarm clock, like 34, and then maybe I'll skip this, maybe I'll skip. And now you're awake, man. Now, now you're starting to worry about the consequences of not going back to sleep before you've even given yourself an opportunity to go back to sleep. And most people will tell you, wake up, get out of bed and go into your living room and read a book or do some stretching. I'm like, why? That's more awake and that's not restful.
Right.
The reason they tell you to get out of bed is because people lay in bed and they stress about not sleeping. And I'm telling you that laying there and meditating and eventually falling back to sleep is way better for you than getting up and going to do something else and then coming back and still having to go through the process and falling back to sleep. Right.
Right. I think one of the things I've experienced, at least, is that it's easier to fall asleep in the first place because the bed is cool. And then if I go to the bathroom and I come back, now I'm laying back down in a warm spot and I end up finding myself taking the top, like the what do they call it? The duvet off, and I'm under the top sheet. And then I'm like, all right, I'm cool enough now. I can put the duvet back on. Now I can fall asleep. Right. That's something I've run into myself. What about naps? Well, better way to ask this question, less specific, more general. I didn't get a good night's sleep and I need to be productive today. Like I woke up at 1:15, fell back asleep at 4:30. I checked the clock. Lesson learned. Lesson learned. We're not going to do that again.
I have my clients, by the way, call me and be like, after I've taught them all this, they're like, man, I woke up at 1:30 and I couldn't fall back asleep till like 3. I was like, how do you know?
Right.
Like, well,
someone forgot to take the coaching. Yeah.
You outed yourself, brother.
So I will heed that advice and not check the clock. I will do something else and I will just close my eyes and box breathe. I like box breathing. For people who don't know what box breathing is, just really quick, it's I don't know if it's always 4 seconds, but I always do 4 seconds, a 4-second inhale, a 4-second hold, a 4-second exhale, a 4-second hold on repeat until
and it just has to be a box, so it's consistent.
Right. So it could be
if 2 seconds is your threshold, then you do it for 2. If you can do it for 10 seconds, do it for 10, like whatever it is. Like, basically you're balancing the autonomics. You're getting rid of the stress response.
Yeah. The benefit I find from that is that it's forced meditation. People who struggle to meditate, oftentimes I think don't actually understand what meditation is. If you're sitting there focusing on your breath, you're meditating.
You're meditating. Yeah.
Right. It's okay.
I'll do you one better. I have, my older clients specifically, most of these are, they're high achieving, very often and very opinionated, left brain, very logical people. And they aren't going to mess around with any of this meditation mumbo jumbo. I'm not going to talk them into any kind of mindfulness stuff. And I pick up on that really quickly, and I know that, and I say, hey, all right, for the next week, what I want you to do is I want you to do everything that you can possibly do during your day and try to expand throughout the week, but everything you can possibly do throughout each day with your non-dominant hand. So brush your teeth with your left hand, open your car door with your left hand, open every doorknob with your left hand, write with your left hand if you can, like do everything you can do with your left hand the whole week. And then they come back and they tell me, and I act really interested, and I listen to their story. And then I say, okay, now for the next week, what I want you to do is I want you to focus on the pressure of your feet. So every time you're standing, I want you to think, is the weight of your feet more on the balls of your feet? Is it more on the heel of your feet? Is it more kind of in the midfoot? Where is it, outside, inside? And then as you walk, I want you to think about that too. And even just if your feet are flat on the ground and you're sitting in a chair, try to check in on that every now and then too. And then, after I give them several of these things, then I tell them, okay, so all I was doing was mindfulness training, right? That forces you to think about right now. When I'm thinking about how I open the doorknob with my left hand or brush my teeth with my left hand and like how weird this feels. And then and all of that stuff, like I'm thinking about that, right? Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking about the moment. I'm not thinking about what could possibly go wrong in the future or something that I did regretfully in the past. I'm in the now, and that's mindfulness training. And then I say, all right, here you go. You've already done mindfulness training. Now trust me, and let's try this next technique.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, so is there a way for a person who now knows I didn't sleep well last night and I have a big day today and I want to be productive?
You got to mitigate it. Yeah.
Is there anything I can do today to be more productive, even though I screwed up last night?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say here is what I get the most hate for. So let's get it out of the way. If you're somebody who really likes to train, I'll use the word train just because I think it has a different connotation than exercise, but you may call it exercising, and we can distinguish between that. If you're exercising with the intent of getting better, right? If you're trying to get faster or stronger, improve performance through exercise, add muscle, whatever it is, you're training in my mind, right? You can also just be active, and some people would consider that exercise, like taking the stairs instead of the elevator, parking, a mile from your house or a mile from your office building, walking a little bit when you're walking, whatever, mowing your own lawn, washing your car, blah blah blah, cleaning your own house. Like, stay active. And I'm not calling that exercise, but if you don't get it, the contract you're born into is basically it takes 8 hours to recover from being awake from 16 hours, and you can't break that contract any more than you can break the contract that you're going to die. Nobody's getting out of this alive, and everybody needs 8 hours of sleep. That's just the way it is. Like it, dislike it, I don't really care. So if you choose to sleep 6 hours, and by the way, we're the only animal on this planet that will choose to sleep less than it needs. And so if you choose to sleep 6 hours instead of 8 hours, well, it takes 8 hours to recover. Right? I only did it for 6 hours. So how am I going to get through tomorrow? Right? I didn't recover. The whole point of me going to sleep tonight is to repair from today and to prepare for tomorrow. And that includes like fixing everything that I broke today, restoring everything I depleted today, and then wiring myself, my body, my brain with the expectation of tomorrow being a lot like today. Like, how can I be better for tomorrow? And if you think about it, if you could recover 100% every night, you would wake up exactly the same every day, which means you would never age. So you're not only are you losing performance, but you're choosing to age faster. And so if I need 8 hours and I only get 6, I have 25% less recovery, less sort of fuel resources to get through the day. I compensate through stress hormones. Stress hormones are catabolic, though. So stress now, instead of me going into the day with all of these stores and capabilities from my anabolic restoration during the night, I'm using stress hormones to rob my body, to use my body as a fuel source to get my body through that day. And now if my stress hormones are too high, when I try to go to sleep, then I get worse sleep because my stress hormones are high. And then because I got bad sleep, now I'm going to have higher stress hormones the next day. And that's a self-propagating spiral. But to get back to the question, one of the big problems of not sleeping enough is the excess of stress hormones, because those are catabolic, right? So anything you can do to reduce those are beneficial, right? So meditation, box breathing, activity, not strenuous activity. I tell people, don't work out. If you didn't get a good night's sleep, do not go train, because you didn't recover from yesterday. It does you no good to train today. That's going to leave you more to recover from tonight. And even if you get 8 hours, that wasn't enough, because you had a day and a quarter worth of recovery and you only got 1 day worth of recovery. So don't work out. Stay active, though, because activity has lots of benefits metabolically. That's days when you're sleep deprived, or days to be really well focused, like to really focus on your nutrition, right? Obviously, focusing on your nutrition all the time is ideal. Nobody lives ideally. But really, really focus and say, no kidding, like, today I need this. Today I need to make sure that I'm putting the least amount of stress on my body as possible. So I'm going to lower my stress hormones during the day any way that I know how. Yoga, meditation, box breathing, Tai Chi, breath work, whatever it is that you do, massage, body work, I don't care. Like anything that lowers your stress hormones, you do that during the day. Naps, which you were going to allude to, or you were going to say, I think, Naps are great. A short nap restores creativity. A medium nap restores creativity and cognitive functioning. And a long nap, so like something around 90 minutes, the full sleep cycle. So you get recovery of, metabolic recovery, physiologic recovery as well. So you can be stronger and faster and more resilient and all that type of stuff. As long as your nap as long as you wake up from your nap no closer than 3 hours to your bedtime, naps don't interfere with sleep. And then, of course, stimulants work. I'd be careful with using stimulants too late in the day. So like if you drink coffee, I usually recommend don't drink coffee after noon. Nicotine actually is a good stimulant. It's, it's addictive if you inhale it. It's not addictive if you use the gum or the mint or something, it just goes like between your cheek and gum and about 1 milligram. And then acetylcholine is a supplement that you can take that kind of is weight promoting. It's one of the weight promoting neurotransmitters, make you feel better throughout the day. And then if you know that you're really having a hard time controlling your stress, especially if you're exercising, there's a supplement called phosphatidylserine, and phosphatidylserine will lower cortisol levels as well. So again, you're just mitigating. Obviously, you also want to do the same thing you should do every morning. Or I'm not shitting on you, but the ideal thing to do every morning is to get outside, or if you can't get outside, if it's gloomy or cloudy or too cold or whatever, some sort of bright light therapy, about 10 to 20 minutes of bright light, ideally sunlight, low in the sky, early in the day. That helps reset your circadian rhythm, make sure that you're going to sleep better that night. It also changes a lot of physiology, and it's going to make you better, stronger throughout the day.
I was smiling. I was smiling when you said, I'm not shitting all over you, because we just did a podcast talking about how to avoid shitting all over yourself.
Oh, okay. There you go.
So I know we have limited time left, and you just started talking about supplementations, and I want to talk about yours, because there's my wife, my parents, my friends, what should I take to go to sleep? I'm like, why are you asking me? I was a chiropractor who now runs a business that helps people get out of pain and live more active lives from around the world. Like, I'm not the guy to ask. And so you created Sleep Remedy. I imagine that is the concoction that you used to help the SEALs get off of Ambien. Would I be correct in assuming that?
Yeah. So it was actually after I got out of the SEAL team. So, one of the problems of me getting out of the military was that, I was leaving a vacuum in the SEAL teams, right? Because I'd come there and kind of identified these problems, and we're helping people improve their performance. And, a lot of research was born out of that. And then they've gotten a lot smarter all about that over the last, whatever, it's been 13 or 14 years. Well, no, I guess I got out. It's been 10 years since I got out, but I got out and I left this vacuum. And, they're just going to replace me with some Joe Blow doc who's waiting to go back into his residency. And, and the SEALs probably aren't going to trust him and aren't going to talk to him about the same things. And he doesn't know the community that well. And he's just going to be a doctor, and like all that, all that progress that we made is going to kind of come to a screeching halt. So, I started, and that's why I do the philanthropic work that I do now, because I just started seeing guys. I just started telling guys, well, just text me, call me. I'll still give you advice. If I'm prescribing anything, I'll still do that. Whatever. I'm still here for you guys. So that continues to this day. But about a year after I got out, they were just really haranguing me about this product, right? Because they were like, this is such a pain in the ass. We have to go buy all this stuff all over the place, and it's too much to travel with. And, you can't always get the brand that, and some of the brands are completely ineffective, as right.
Yep.
Probably 50% of them are crushed bird feathers. There's no nutrition and value to them at all. And so I naively thought, well, okay, I'll step out of my brick and mortar. I'll just do my consulting practice. And I'll develop this supplement, and then I'll just sell that to the SEAL teams, for a very, very modest cash flow for me. I don't really, it's not what I do. This isn't what I want to do for a career. I don't want to be a supplement salesman. So I got out, when I was out, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to learn how to build a supplement. And I had no idea. I had no idea how a supplement was made. And the first thing I tried to do is talk to other supplement companies. And if you know anything about the supplement industry, it's pretty smarmy, And so there are a lot of guys who are really willing to take full advantage of me and then wanted to have complete control over what they were actually going to make and how they're going to promote it and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I'm not sure that's the best plan. So I was like, all right, I'm going to bite the bullet and learn how to do all this. And so I learned how to produce supplements and then Rob Wolf got involved and Peter Attia got involved, and they're like, they're my friends. I was talking to them, and they're like, hey, let's put some money into this and make it a business and really launch it. And so I had a client who at the time who owned a digital marketing agency, and we swapped services a bit, and he taught me how to build this thing. And again, my plan was really then at that point, it was like, okay, well, I'm going to build it up. I'm going to get it off the ground in a year, and then I'm going to hand it over to the CEO, and that person's going to take it to the moon, and we're going to sell it. We're all going to take money back. So that's our life. So we launched it at PaleoFX, and within, I don't know, with whatever that is, 3 or 4 day event, by the time that event was over, we were already in the black for the company, right? For our initial investment. And so, shortly thereafter, I give everybody their investment cash back. And now we just all basically have a lottery ticket. Mm-hmm. But there was always something to do that I needed to get to this next step before it really makes sense to bring somebody in. And then there's ups and downs, and you lose some. So whatever. 8 years later, I'm still running the damn company and still just doing private consulting and don't have a brick and mortar yet. Mm-hmm. Again, and I probably never will have a brick and mortar again at this point. But yeah, that's how it came about. And then, there's no tricks in it. There's no. Pharmaceuticals all a trick, right? So one of the important things when your brain's getting ready to go to sleep is a buildup of a neuropeptide called GABA. Stands for gamma aminobutyric acid, if anybody cares. And it kind of slows down the neocortex, right? So the motor cortex and sensory cortex, so that you quit interacting with the world. That's one of the requirements to be asleep. Your eyes and ears and mouth and everything still works. You just aren't paying attention to it. And then your motor functions retarded too, so that you don't move around, you're not interacting with the world. And that's one of the prerequisites for falling asleep. So the pharmaceutical industry's idea about that is if GABA binds to this receptor and has a GABA effect that we'll call a GABA effect of 1, well, we can build this other molecule that binds to that receptor and has an effect of 10, right? And so now, I'm going to force you into there. And then, that was benzodiazepines. And then those proved to be problematic for multiple reasons. So they developed a new drug, a Z drug, which is like Ambien and Bethesda. And that binds to the GABA receptor and has an effect of 100. So now we're really shutting your brain down. And so that's the pharmaceutical way of dealing with things like insomnia. I think that's foolish because GABA is one of 1,000 things that's involved, right? And so it's just a pharmacological trick, and the research shows that it doesn't really lead to sleep. It leads to unconsciousness, which isn't sleep. So you don't get the regenerative benefit. So all my sleep supplement is putting all the nutrients in your brain that should be there in the first place and should be there in higher concentrations as your brain is, going through the processes of going to bed. I do have melatonin in there, but it's such a small dose. It's meant to be an initiation dose because I want you to make your own melatonin because that's part of staying asleep, to be able to regulate that. So I have 2 micrograms of melatonin, and there's just an initiation, a dusting of it. And then the melatonin production pathway, which is tryptophan, becomes 5-hydroxytryptophan. And then with the help of magnesium and vitamin D3, that becomes serotonin. Serotonin becomes melatonin. Some GABA in there to help slow your brain down. Some phosphatidylserine in there to decrease your stress hormones, your cortisol levels. Some L-theanine because that's an amino acid that potentiates the effect of GABA, and that's it. Now I'm just bringing I'm bringing lumber to the construction site, right? I'm not building anything. You still have to do the right things to get ready for bed. You still have to be healthy. You still have to have good sleep hygiene and all that other stuff. So it's really like an insurance policy to make sure that everything's there. And when you sort of hyper concentrate that, like if you look at our ancestors, the way we evolved, it takes about 3 hours after the sun goes down to really feel like going to sleep. And nobody's going to spend 3 hours getting ready for bed in modern times. So like the physiologic trick of it really is to just kind of get a lot more of all of this stuff into your brain that would have been there had you spent 3 hours getting ready for bed instead of 30 minutes or an hour getting ready for bed. And then, it improves your ability to fall asleep, and then improves your ability to stay asleep, and then improves the quality of your sleep throughout the night. So, but that's it. It's all nutritional. It's all nutritional supplements. It's all like in the truest sense. I tell people there's an ideal way to live, and then there's reality. Mm-hmm. And between those 2 points, we supplement, right? Supplemental behaviors, supplemental compounds, right? Like gadgets to help us meditate, or blue blocking glasses to get the light out of our eyes, or whatever, naps to mitigate, like whatever. You're that's supplemental activity. The ideal is to live ideally so that you don't need supplements, but that's not reality. So we have supplements.
I imagine there's no risk of taking an exogenous product that's going to reduce our own production of those same things if we stop taking it.
Right. So that's another reason that I'm really light on the melatonin, because melatonin is a hormone. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I haven't seen any research about vitamin D3, because vitamin D3 is a hormone as well, right? Exogenous vitamin D3 may well decrease your own production if when you're out in appropriate sunlight with enough skin exposed. Like that might decrease your production. I've never thought of that until right now, and I don't know why. But melatonin, really hard to study when we're talking about the brain. Obviously, a third of your nervous system isn't in your skull, right? It's throughout your body. So all of this stuff works throughout your entire body. But when you're talking about what's inside of your brain, it's really hard to figure that out, right? Like I kind of have to drill a hole in your head and
skip that.
pull some fluid out to figure out what your melatonin levels are. So, of course, we do that in mice and stuff instead of doing it in humans. So we do have some idea. But melatonin being a hormone, so far, there's no research to show that it decreases your melatonin production. But again, that's really hard to quantify that. It's really hard to know that for sure. But there is plenty of research that shows that taking more melatonin than you need to take, or taking like a big bolus of melatonin, meaning just like a larger, like maybe it's how much you need over the course of your night of sleep, but you're taking it all at once, which still just drives blood concentration up 8 times, right? Because it's like it's all in there now. What you needed over 8 hours is all there right now. Mm-hmm. And so we know that does downregulate melatonin receptors. And so if you need, if every cell needs 10 melatonin receptors to do its job, and you have 10 times the amount of melatonin in your bloodstream that you need, well, then your brain's smart and it's be like, well, let's quit using all of our protein or amino acids and stuff to build these receptors. We don't need to build those. We only need 1 instead of 10. And now when you quit taking exogenous melatonin, you're screwed now, because now your normal production is 1/10 of what you need. So now you're deficient.
Right.
And I think it probably does decrease how much you take too, but I think it probably does decrease how much melatonin you make too, but I don't know that for sure. Like I don't know that anyone's demonstrated that.
Well, and that's why that's the one thing that you have in such a small dose in the supplement.
Right.
Dr. Part, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say you need probably somewhere around 6 to 8 micrograms throughout the whole night. So I'm giving you 2 micrograms. Not all of that's going to get to your brain, so maybe you're getting 1 microgram. So again, it's like an initiation dose, probably would have been there if you lived like your ancestors and spent 3 hours getting ready for bed.
Right, Dr. Parsley, thank you for coming on and speaking with me today. I appreciate it very much.
I appreciate the opportunity, buddy.
My pleasure.
All right.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Active Life Podcast. Please remember, give us a hand, rate it, review it wherever you listen to shows. We are on a mission to humanize the healthcare industry by professionalizing the fitness industry to empower the individual to live a life unlimited by the way that their body looks, feels, or performs. If you are inspired by that mission and want to jump on the wagon, find us anywhere. Active Life Professional on Instagram, Active Life RX on Instagram. Come to me personally at Dr. Sean Pastuch. We want to welcome you onto the train. We want you to be a part of the mission. We want to offer you the opportunity to pursue this right alongside us. We're inspired by your effort, and we hope to help you in your journey. Turn pro.